I'd like to welcome you to day one of the 8th Annual Powerful Conference. It's so exciting to see all of you, and despite the Zoom fatigue that 2021 has brought, we hope you will find this virtual conference meaningful and inspiring. Please make ample use of the chat function to connect with friends, peers, and hopefully new connections. And please also place in the chat where you're joining us from. I saw some of you were already doing that. And as Corinne mentioned, this will be recorded except for the focus discussions. And we'd love it if you turn your camera on, and then we provided the Zoom background for your optional use. And with that, the theme this year is women's work on our own terms, where we seek to turn the historical definition of the unpaid labor of women, traditionally in the home, on its head, and highlight the groundbreaking work women are leading in our profession. Today is about women telling their stories and showing their work, and we hope you leave today inspired, connected, and feeling expanded. Now it is with pleasure I introduce to you Mitra Mamari, the AIALA Vice President and 2022 AIALA President-elect, partner at ZGF Architects. Born in Iran, Mitra emigrated to the United States as a teenager with the last name Mamari, which means architect in Farsi. One thing is clear, Mitra was born to be an architect. Through adapting to a new culture and language at a young age, she developed a passion for diversity, inclusion, and equity. In her practice and in her role as a partner at ZGF Architects, Mitra has made it her mission to create a more equitable profession that represents the communities where we live and work. I'll turn it over to Mitra.
Thank you, Ashley, and good morning, everybody. As Vice President and 2020 President-elect of AIALA, it's my delight to welcome you to Powerful 8, Women's Work on Our Own Terms. What a great title. To start the day, and as Ashley already encouraged you to get into the chat room, here's some prompts to get us started. Besides your location and what brings you here, what is your work? What work is the most meaningful to you? What is your dream on your own terms? Please drop this in the chat. I see so many amazing women that are here today, and how we can all benefit from the answers from today. Since I first heard about this year's conference, I have been thinking about diversity, unique points of view, how our own terms depends on who we are, where we come from, the cultures we grew up in, and how has our own terms shaped my life as a woman, an immigrant, and an architect. So my family immigrated to the United States in 1983. My mom, a practicing Muslim, had selected to wear the hijab. After moving to the United States, my father, my siblings, and I begged her to reconsider her decision. We knew the hijab represented more than a religious belief, that it also had a political connotation. We were concerned for her safety and for her fitting into this new country and culture. We implored and she resisted. We pled and she resisted. You see, my mom wanted to live on her own terms. Looking back now, older, experienced, I'm proud that she did. Today, in practice, I have that pride for all the women I work with, for pursuing practice on their own terms. I have that pride for all of you here today. Because as architects who are women in a male-dominant field, and for the many of us from a minority background, we have to do things in our own way, or we are not bringing what makes us unique, courageous, and resilient to the table. As we embark on the 8th Purposeful Conference, which I know will be a day of inspiration and learning, I welcome you to reflect and be proud of all the ways that you have lived on your own terms and how you continue to inspire others by being authentic. Thank you for the amazing women in Architecture Committee, led by chairs Ashley Richardson, AIA, and Jennifer Noel Wong, AIA, vice chairs Kristen Atkins Zimmerman, AIA, and past chairs Chiara Bonsignori, AIA, and Maureen Marukian, Associate AIA. These ladies have worked tirelessly to put this amazing conference together. I am grateful for their dedication. On behalf of AIA Los Angeles, welcome to Powerful 8. Let's get started. Jen, handing it off to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mitra, for the beautiful introduction. I want to use this time to thank our sponsors. First up would be our two presenting sponsors, KFA and Matt Construction, who were also our presenting sponsors last year. So thank you for your continued support. Our champion sponsors, Co-Architects and ZGF, and also our scholarship sponsors, Chu Gooding, DLR Group, EYRC Architects, Hensel Phelps, NAC, Page and Turnbull, Thornton Tomasetti, and Steinberg Hart. We also have our other sponsors, our Friends of Powerful, participating sponsors, and our emerging sponsors. So thank you for all your support for this conference. We also want to thank our annual sponsors, the gold sponsors, silver sponsors, and bronze sponsors.
Okay, thanks, Jen. And thank you again to our sponsors and Mitra for the introduction. Before we dive in, here's an overview of the schedule for this morning. We have several incredible keynote speakers and emerging voices presenting their work. And then at 11, we will spend an hour in focused discussions. And there will be 6 breakout rooms for you to choose from. And Jen will explain all of that to you at 11. We will then come back from the breakout discussions with an incredible closing speaker. So make sure you come back after the breakout rooms, and we will wrap up day 1 by 12:30 p.m. At the end of the day of the conference today, we'll give you a sneak peek of the schedule for day 2 of Powerful, which is next Friday, October 1st from 9 to 12:30. And now I'm very pleased to welcome Christiana Kairilou, AIA, the Los Angeles Studio Director, Executive Director, and Vivian Lee, FAIA, the New York Studio Executive Director, with their talk, Intrepid Possibilities, the Women of Woods Bagot.
Good morning, and thank you, Ashley, and thanks to the Women in Architecture Committee for inviting us to join the conversation on women's work on our own terms, and to join this amazing group of talented women in conversation today. My colleague Vivian and I are honored and humbled to be here today and to talk about our journeys and how we got to where we are today. And of course, my name is Christiana Kairilou, Principal in charge and Executive Director of the Woods Bagot LA studio.
Hi, I'm Vivian Lee. I'm the Executive Director of New York's Woods Bagot, and so pleased to be here. And I'm also the current co-chair for AIA, Women in Architecture Committee in New York City. So I just wanted to give a shout out to you guys. You're doing amazing work. We need to collaborate on a future event together. I also want to give a shout out to our committee for planning a symposium for November 19th and 20th. Be for a lookout for our social media post. More on that later. But to start off today, I am so excited at the topic and the theme of this year's Powerful 8. When they approached us, Christiana and I thought about what we can discuss and share with you all. And the topic of intrepid possibilities came to mind. And today we're going to share our journey to where we are today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start with a question to Christiana. Please tell us what your journey is like and how you got started.
Thank you, Vivian, and thank you to Mitra. It all resonated so deeply with me, your story and your beginnings. Some of you might know that I am originally from Cyprus, which is a small island in the Mediterranean. I am the third of 4 girls, four women, and I was actually born in a tent as my family became refugees when Turkey invaded Cyprus, and they lost their home and everything they owned. They eventually rebuilt their lives, and they resettled in a small fishing village, which eventually was transformed into a large major tourist destination. As a child, I would walk around the neighborhood with my scale, my pen and paper, and with curiosity, I would try to capture the essence of the place and, the buildings, or rather the traditional brick homes, the experiences of the spaces in between, the town square, the village center, the character of the streets, and the stories that they tell of the people. As these became to vanish with the development that was brought on by tourism, I became interested in capturing the cultural evolution of architecture through the different stages in time, and to interested in creating new experiences that honor the old and the new, and reflecting the sense of place that endures over time. So when I was meeting with my career counselor in high school, I knew I wanted to be an architect. And interestingly enough, a few of my male classmates actually scoffed at me, and they said, "You, an architect?" And having grown up in a traditional family where women were meant for more conventional roles, my parents questioned whether this was an appropriate profession for me as a woman. So I accepted both of these challenges, and I set my mind to prove everyone wrong. And I dedicated myself to my studies, and I committed to working hard, and with my sisters advocating on my behalf as well. My parents eventually bought into my dream, and they supported my endeavors. And so there I was heading off to school to study architecture and historic preservation. Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. I was thrilled and excited about the possibilities, and scared at the same time, arriving from a small island to what I thought Savannah was a big city at the time, was a big culture shock. But soon enough, I discovered that it wasn't actually. I had visited cities like San Francisco and New York, and I really, truly fell in love with the big city. And my time at SCAD was invaluable. It was so rich of different cultures and diverse perspectives. The professors were themselves, bringing their own unique experiences and perspectives. And, I was thirsty for learning, and I immersed myself in my studies and worked hard. And the program was so impeccable. By the time I graduated, NAB awarded it a master's accreditation. And, I feel grateful for all these early experiences that really paved the path for my journey forward. With that, Vivian, I would love to hear about your story and how you got started and why architecture. Next slide.
Well, like Mitra and Christiana, I'm also an immigrant. I was born in Taiwan, and on the picture on the left, that's when I was, I think, 5 years old or 6 years old, looking very executive-like. And when I was 7, my family moved to South America in Paraguay, where I spent 6 years over there, going to a Catholic school and learning Spanish. And at that time, it was, I believe, my 3rd grade. For my homework, I designed a house and had a floor plan to orient the house to best capture the morning sunlight and afternoon rays. And my teacher was so impressed. She said, "Vivian, you should think about studying arquitectura." And at that time, architecture, what is that? And I'm sure you all know, when a grown-up tells you something that you're going to become someone in the future, that sticks to you. And ever since then, I started thinking about architecture. Obviously, we all played with Legos. I started my architecture by building Lego houses. As I moved on, I became more and more interested. And when I came to the States when I was 13, I applied myself in school, tried to excel, got into Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, the school of choice at the time. And I was so thrilled to have the opportunity to start my formal education as an architect. For my 4th year, I moved to DC with a consortium program that San Luis Obispo offered. And from that, it got the travel bug in me, and I applied eventually for my 5th year to go to Italy. I went to Italy for my 5th year of college, and the lower left-hand corner is a picture of my presentation board, which is very elementary compared to what I see nowadays on the digital platforms. We still had boards and drawings and in collages. That was my professor, Gianni Betta. So when I graduated, it was 1991. So that was a major recession. And it's interesting because I see this year's pandemic really affected people's decision what they want to do with their careers. And to think back then, I decided to think about how I can take advantage of this and find a creative solution opportunities to continue my career. I decided to stay in Italy and got myself a job in an Italian company and remained there for 6 years. So I speak fluent Italian, which is great. I worked in a firm that actually wanted someone who spoke English, which is great, and someone who can actually work on CAD. And this is AutoCAD release 12. So none of that Revit stuff at the time. So after 6 years, I decided to come back to the States because I knew I had to take the ARE, and I'm sure you all know, it's one of those things in our profession that is that we cannot avoid. When I came back to the Bay Area in San Francisco, I started working, and another opportunity came to take me to Hong Kong. So I moved to Hong Kong again and stayed there for 2 years. And then the Asian market crashed. And this is when you need to pivot again and find other opportunities and sort of take advantage of the situation and see how you can be adventurous and be fearless in finding the possibilities in your life to chart the next path of your career. So in 1999, I came to New York. And just to paraphrase Frank Sinatra, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I came to New York City and sort of bounced around various firms to eventually going to Meyer Partners as a principal before I joined Woods Bagot. So with that, I'm actually going to turn over to the next slide and just talk a little bit about my career procession. So in my days working both Italy and Hong Kong and United States, I've worked in many projects outside the United States as well as the United States. And in this collage, I really want to illustrate all the possibilities as a career in architect. You don't have to specialize in anything in specific. I actually really enjoy doing different sectors of design, from retail, high-end retail, to lab, to high schools and higher education, universities, to towers. And what I see is that when you work in different sectors, you do find the opportunities, and it gives you a different perspective in how you view architecture. Next, please. As I build my design portfolio around the world, both in Czech Republic and Italy and South Korea, what I think is important is that the collaboration with people, and to learn from others, to have that exchange, to be able to talk about ideas and share knowledge that really made me the designer and architect that I am today. I think the possibilities are endless. As an architect, you're now bound to one firm, especially now with the technology. You can do anything and go anywhere. And with this, I would like to turn over to Christiana and have her share some of her journey in terms of beginning her professional career. Over to you, Christiana.
Thanks, Vivian. Thank you. Thank you for the next slide. Interestingly enough, after I graduated, and I resonate so much of what Vivian just said, after I graduated, I wasn't quite ready to move back to Cyprus, obviously, at my parents' disappointment. I had fallen in love with San Francisco a few years prior, and I felt like this was my opportunity to experience living in the big city and having new experiences. So I, in the spirit of learning and growing, because that was always from the beginning part of my ethos, the learning and growing, I was able to convince my parents to let me move to the west, to California, instead of east, to Cyprus, and do a 1-year optional practical training, followed by a 2-year program in environmental studies at Berkeley. I was so thrilled and excited about the possibilities, and I wasn't worried about finding a job. It was 1999 at the time, and unlike Vivian, I was moving west versus east. I started applying for jobs in hospitality design and historic preservation, and unfortunately, those jobs required experience, which I didn't have. So I expanded my search to include larger firms. And 2 days before I was to move, SOM gave me a call and invited me to an interview. And I was thrilled. Suffice to say, they offered me a job, and they gave me my first opportunity. At the time, I didn't really know the impact that moment would have to the rest of my career. In early 2000, I joined a team that was kicking off a new project for electronic arts. You can see the image to the bottom right below my photo. That was my first project as a young professional, starting from start to finish, concept through CA. And that made it very clear to me that I wanted to be a well-rounded architect and to experience all the different facets of architecture. After electronic arts was completed, I was exposed to several mixed-use tall tower projects, mostly in Asia, and that completely transformed my career trajectory and my career route of what I thought was going to be my career route. And I fell in love with tall buildings and mixed-use projects. And suffice to say, I was no longer interested in going back to school, and I was already immersed in a real life university, experiencing hands-on learning on tall towers. It was an amazing time. For me, the apex was really, and I can talk about all the different projects. There were many highlights, but really the apex was the China World Trade Center tower, which you see in the top. I don't know if it's your left or my left, your right, probably your left, is the tall tower, which is 320 meters tall. It was the tallest by far that I had worked on, and it was very special to me because I worked on it from the competition stage through the winning and award of the projects to different iterations of the design and the schemes and the concepts through final documentation and delivery, and finally being able to go be there in person and to see it real life and experience what it was like to be part of that project. I wore so many different hats, experienced different tasks. I took on different roles, and I worked with an amazing, talented team that shared my passion for great design, for working together, for collaborating. Collaboration was always part of my ethos as well, and loving and growing by working together. So after 9 amazing years at SOM, I started to look for new opportunities that would offer me more learning and growth in other facets of architecture. So with that said, next slide. So that's when in 2008, the Woods Bagot opportunity came along for a small group of us that to join Woods Bagot and to start the office in San Francisco. This small group of talented individuals that I respect, admire, and love working with, I just couldn't pass this up. It was a perfect opportunity to start something new from the ground up. And, you know, I joined as an associate at the time. And even though I wasn't a principal, I was really felt invested in the endeavor and you know, captured it as if it was my own, and I jumped right in. I wore different hats. I did whatever was needed to get us to be successful. And you know, I treated it as my own business. And just like my parents taught us, not be afraid to pick up any task, not be afraid to fail. And if you do, you pick up and try again. And you work hard and you are dedicated and committed. And with that, with patience, you know, success comes along and it pays off. And we grew from seven of us in 2008 to almost 100 FTE at one time. I think that was around 2015, 2016. We had several large scale projects, both locally and globally. And I felt like Woods Bagot truly gave me the opportunity to be intrepid. That's how I felt. It opened up the world for me to possibilities and fully experience the global collaboration, the collective intelligence, the sharing of knowledge and expertise across borders, and working the 24/7 model of servicing our clients and across all scales. I was fortunate enough, as you can see on this slide, several of the global collaboration projects that I was involved with almost all 16 studios, maybe except a couple of the studios, but pretty much collaborated with every studio at Woods Bagot for the most part, including a project in Cyprus, which is the bottom right image of all the towers in Limassol, Cyprus, with our London studio. I was so proud to have been able to take the work home and, incredible journey, as well as more local residential projects in California, and even smaller interiors projects like the Qantas lounges at LAX. It's been an amazing journey. And about 5 years ago, I was elevated to principal, and I was appointed studio executive chair or studio executive director of the San Francisco office. And I felt that my contributions to the success of the studio were being recognized and rewarded. And, I felt empowered that there wasn't anything that I couldn't take on. And in 2019, I was approached by the board and our CEO about the possibilities of relocating to Los Angeles and leading our growth and expansion in the market and building our studio presence. So, what a great opportunity and a great challenge to grow something from the ground up. And in the entrepreneurial spirit that my parents instilled in us, I just couldn't pass it up. I jumped right in, and here we are, looking forward, looking ahead to the possibilities, not just for Los Angeles, but also to North America with my colleagues like Vivian and Maureen in San Francisco. So with that said, I'd love to pass it over to my colleague, Vivian.
Next slide, please. Well, you probably wonder how I ended up at Woods Bagot. And again, sometimes, you don't really plan your career, things just sort of happen. And, one day a gentleman called me, and this is after already spending 15 years at Myers as a design principal. And throughout my career, I was very much focused on design, and my trajectory was always very much design-based, working on various projects, both in the U.S. and abroad. And also, just back in 2020, I was elevated to College of Fellows under design. So it was a huge accomplishment, and I'm very proud of that. You do begin to think about your career at a certain point, and it just happens that this gentleman called me and asked me if I was interested in a senior position at an Australian firm. I was very intrigued. So when they told me it was Woods Bagot, I want to dig in a little bit more. And it happens that Christiana was in town in New York for a shareholders meeting. That was the first time I met her. We spent 3 hours talking, and my takeaway was be intrepid. And that word really stuck in my head. And I thought about, okay, what am I going to do now? After a career based on design, now they're offering me this opportunity to take on an executive role and basically navigate the firm and help grow the firm in New York City. Very exciting opportunity. And I asked myself, does this opportunity give me something to look forward to? I also asked myself, is this a place where I can make a difference? And third, I asked myself, does this place really need me? I decided to take on the challenge. And today, it's been 18 months. I started actually just before the pandemic in February 2020. And, I have not looked back. It's been an amazing, amazing experience I'm just working with this extraordinary group of people, dedicated and talented. And Christiana, you're one of them. And I love the collaboration between our studios across North America and across the globe. We have 17 studios, and there's a constant exchange of information. I can call someone from London to learn about faience tiles. I can call someone in Melbourne to learn about the latest digital glass technology. I can call to people in Hong Kong to help us with our projects, or in Dubai. This kind of cross-pollination between design expertise and experience, really show me the possibilities that we have as architects. Again, like I said, we don't have to restrict to, our cities or our country. The world is so big, and we have endless possibilities. One thing about Woods Bagot that really it gave me sort of the desire to be part of it, is their credo about people architecture. And I'm showing the slide where we say that people architecture is a celebration of diversity across cultures, propelled by the sheer sense of empathy with the values of end users and the values of design are one and the same. And I love that credo. This is the way I've been practicing for the last 3 years. And I very, very much look forward to taking to the next stage in collaboration with Christiana and find new possibilities in expanding our firm and expanding our studio and bring people in to learn a little bit more what we do and what we can contribute to our communities and to the people that we live with. So I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A. I mean, Christiana and I can just keep talking. So I would love to hear what you guys, if you have any questions or any comments. If not, then Christiana and I can continue to share a little bit more about our experience working at Westbaggett as executive directors.
We have a few minutes for questions. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. I know everyone seems to really love the 3 questions you asked yourself, Vivian. How did you come up with those questions? Because I think we all want to ask ourselves the same.
Wow. When you're in a pandemic, you have a lot of time to think. Actually, I go running in Central Park every week, and I go for 2 hours. Okay, no phones, no watches, no nothing. Okay, so you really just immerse yourself in your own thoughts and being nature. And when I came to the crossroad to make a decision about this job, and I did really ask myself a lot of questions. And I'm sure a lot of people, like when you look for a new job, you do your like pros and cons. It's like, what are the benefits? What are they paying me? Who are the colleagues? Where is it located? But I think it's beyond that. And I think we do have to ask ourselves, what is our value? How can I be my authentic self and do the best work I can do? So the question is just a way for me to think about my next stage in my career. And is it about money? Not anymore. Is it about, is it about the schedule? We all know we do crazy hours, right? And but we also know that we do our work with passion, and sometimes those hours can go by really quickly. So again, the 3 questions is just very personal way for me to come with my decision, and I'm sure you all have your ways of making decisions on your next career move.
Thanks, Vivian.
So
similarly, I would add to Vivian's also that one question that I always ask myself: Am I continuing to learn and grow? Am I still passionate about what I'm doing, and am I paying it forward? And if so, then great. If not, what else can I do different to follow those values and to continue to stay on track? And on track doesn't mean that the path is a straight line. Evidence in my career, you can plan all you want, but the journey will take you along different routes, along the different ways. So you just have to embrace it and be open. Openness brings more possibilities.
I do want to, I think I see in the chat box a question about family and work-life balance. And this is something that is really pertinent at this time, especially due to the pandemic. And it's funny because at AIA New York, we're actually planning an event. It's called Women at the Helm, where we have 4 amazing speakers, all at the executive level and partner level, making decisions that influence the way we practice our culture. The leadership that they have really affects the way we do our work. Now, in terms of work-life balance, because of the pandemic, and I'm sure all your firms are doing that, we are implementing the hybrid schedule. The hybrid schedule gives the flexibility for women or families to dedicate the time, whether it is in the morning or in the afternoon, or 2 to 3 days a week. And this is the way we try to be able to offer our staff some flexibility and still do the work. As we can all see, for the last 18 months, we are able to be productive and are able to communicate with our clients and consultants and are able to do great work. So the hybrid schedule really allows that to happen. And so personally, my life is very much dedicated to my career, and I really respect all the women out there with families that have to handle both. So my hat's down to you all, and you're doing a great work. And again, as we move on to sort of the next phase of the pandemic, I hope the kind of culture and the possibility of having this flexible schedule will give you more opportunities in building your career.
Christiana, do you have anything to add before we move on to our next speaker?
I think flexibility is what we offer. We should be offering to each and every one of us. Support for each other and not competing against each other, but supporting and having each other's back. We are all working for the same common good, and maybe looks different for each of us, but we're all walking along similar lines as evidenced here today. And that's really important. Be supportive, be generous with our time and paying it forward and bring along with us along the journey the rest of us. That's I think that's how we get there.
And just as a final note, I want everyone to think about their possibilities and embrace the opportunities and the changes that's happening in our life to find the best path for your career. There's so many things that we can do. There's no one size fits all. All our life experiences and backgrounds will lead us to where we are today, and to really be the authentic self that you are and do the best work that you can. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so impressed. I'm just looking at the number, 276 women and men joining us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear our story. And we look forward to continuing the focus panel at 11 o'clock. And the topic is leading with your authentic self, path to leadership.
Thank you so much, Christiana and Vivian. Yes, they will also be joining us for our focus discussion panels. So we will have more information about that closer to 11. So I also wanted to say, I really loved hearing your stories and also Mitra's stories. My parents are immigrants to Los Angeles. So the stories of intrepid possibilities really resonates with me. Next up, we have Judy Camion, principal designer and owner of Elysian Landscapes. Her talk today is titled Far Afield. Please welcome Judy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for including me in the mix. My partner, Dana Bauer, who's an architect and co-principal designer here, and I would like to thank the AIA for including me today. And I'm excited to represent landscape and share our work with you and a bit of my own story. Let's see. So let's see, do I need to, you're all set? You can just click through this. Click through it. Okay. My path to becoming a landscape designer was not a straight line like my predecessors, but rather one full of twists and turns. I studied fine art at UCLA with a focus on painting. And my work was about color, form, silhouette, and repetition. Shortly after graduating, I rented a storefront space off of Melrose and opened a gallery type environment to showcase the work of young LA artists and designers. It was called Livestock. And I hosted poets and musicians, put on fashion shows, and became a stylist for music videos for bands like Depeche Mode, NWA, and Sonic Youth. All the while I was pursuing my career as a painter. At the same time, I had bought an empty lot next to my small bungalow in the neighborhood of Elysian Park with the idea that I would make a garden. I carved up the gentle hillside with a series of terraces in the most simple way. I collected rubble throughout the site and used that to demarc and delineate patio areas. And I had a bag of chalk that I would use to mark out the paths, including this main staircase that is the spine for the overall garden. For about 2 years, while this was happening slowly, bit by bit, I researched and read about plants. I visited growers and haunted nurseries. I made friends with other artists who loved gardens, and I visited plant shows and botanical gardens. I dreamed of what plants I would use to fill up this space once the hardscape was done, and I was absolutely obsessed. When my garden was about 5 years old, I opened what would now be called a pop-up restaurant outside with tables scattered on the various terraces. It was simple fare and prefix, made up of things I bought at the farmer's market and mostly grilled outside. One of my patrons the first night was a dear friend who asked if I would make him a garden and if I could start the next day. One friend led to another and then another, and soon I was working full-time designing and building gardens. It was very natural for me to paint palettes when working on a design. Plants had become my paint box and the outdoors my three-dimensional canvas. For the New York Times, my husband, the artist Eric Otzi, and I built an enormous T of their logo with foliage, which was then planted throughout our demonstration garden at our office, which you can probably see a bit behind me. No plants were harmed in the making of this T. Every project has a unique palette and concept that is specific to that place. We take in site conditions, light patterns, macro and microclimates, in addition to considering the relationship of the landscape to the architecture, the scale of the space and scope of work, the program elements, the client, and what mood and atmosphere, what feeling we hope to create. We work with cool blues and acidy yellows, verdant greens. We love vibrant pops of color, warm tones, and play with soft textures against hard graphic forms and silhouettes, unexpected scale shifts, fragrance, and seasonal change. An early project on a hillside in Hollywood came with a large pair of bare retaining walls that the client hated. There was no soil at the base of these walls due to the large footings, so we had to be creative about how to soften them with an abundance of cascading planting. An informal staircase that was a casual addition became an unexpectedly focal experience. And a small space that was hemmed in by tall walls was softened with billowing vines and the crunch of gravel and became an inviting and intimate spot on the property. Sorry for the fire. In San Marino, an oak-filled property was the site for a small residential campus. The original structures, a modest mid-century home and ceramic studio designed by Carl Straub, were both beautifully restored by Fung and Blot and paired with a new pool and guest house. The landscape provided the connective tissue throughout the almost 2 acres with a hierarchy of movement. Primary, secondary, and tertiary paths all use distinct materials. And the client's favorite room in the house, as they called it, was the fire pit patio at the center, completed with seating and tables we designed for the space and made by our sister furniture company, Plain Air. A recently completed project in Los Feliz is the Cummings estate. The Tudor house is the oldest in the area, and the client and architect, Chet Callahan, restored and expanded it with a modern glass box. The landscape intent was to bridge the new with the old, as well as activate the entire property with a variety of spaces to use and inhabit by the clients and their 2 young sons. Leading to the new wing, we built a pair of stepped planters that flanked a large concrete staircase, finished with black lava stone and filled them with jewel-like succulents. A cool blue garden with a large zipper path created the front entry procession to the historic home, leading to a small plaza for gathering and entertaining at the front entry. The collage shown on the left was faithfully realized with statuesque conifers, native grasses, and charcoal limestone. The clients wanted the spa to be its own destination, so we located it towards the south tip of the lot. The cross was inspired by a sculptural water feature by the textile designer Jack Larson, and the unusual form became part of the experience of exploration and discovery. As the endpoint and final punctuation of the garden, a Corten steel fire pit was fabricated and is frequently used for hangouts and making s'mores, surrounded by tree stumps that came from the property and that were remade into informal stools. In Culver City, the commercial campus called Platform, designed by Abramson Teeger, is a vibrant scene for dining, shopping, and more, with an ever-changing roster of pop-ups, events, and parties. We were asked to come on after the hardscape had been constructed and ended up removing a fair amount of it to create larger areas of planting within the space. 3 distinct plant cultures, native, desert, and subtropical, were affiliated with different zones of the property, which have a variety of building types and conditions. Close to home is a creative campus in North Chinatown along Spring Street, adjacent to the State Historic Park and the LA River. The property, home to the restaurant Major Domo and the bar Apothec, is filled with concrete block warehouses covered in the most extraordinary paintings, which inspired the hardscape materials and plant palette. A fire lane doubles as a low water need meadow, and benches were embedded throughout to encourage people to spend time outside. Smack in the middle of Hollywood, a new model for co-working was created by Selgas Kano. Rather than build one monolithic structure, the architects envisioned a series of glass-wrapped pods amidst a network of paths. Our concept for the planting had a very technical aspect, as well as aesthetic considerations. Trees were needed to create a canopy of shade over the roof and the glass, and the mid-level vegetation provided important privacy and separation between the individual pods. The elevation of the planting was lifted to the height of the desktops to allow planting depth over the subterranean garage. A study shown on the left is responding to the various light conditions in concert with color to help create a most unexpected and unique workplace experience. The Parka Hotel in Palm Springs is one of our largest projects and most beloved. The property has a highly varied assortment of buildings, old and new, large and small, and some are not particularly attractive. Rather than rebuild, the client asks us to make them disappear. We scraped the site clean, except for the 200+ palm trees, a pair of olives, and a cluster of citrus that we dug up and replanted. The concept was to create an eccentric estate garden with a series of linked outdoor rooms, each with their own character and affiliated activity. Guests come and enjoy playing croquet and pétanque, have drinks at the fire pit, and take naps in hammocks, read in cozy little spaces tucked next to a water feature, or take a dip in the big oval pool, with each space embedded in a wild overgrowth of planting. The first phase included 10 of the 13 acres, so we were excited to be asked back to finish out the last 3 a couple of years ago. The new gardens are meant to be an estate within the estate and required new experiences that would complement rather than replicate what had already been previously established. One of the new features is a sunken amphitheater that will be a welcome addition and setting for the dozens of weddings and events that happen here every year. High on a rooftop by the beach, Santa Monica proper has dazzling views from their 2 buildings. One, a beautifully restored Art Deco structure, and the other, a new ground-up design by Howard Lax Architects. Many of our projects are on podium, and we relish the challenge of making the same kinds of immersive gardens above the ground as we do on the ground. Back in Chinatown, an exciting project with Studio Gang includes a new hotel paired with an apartment tower with restaurants and retail on the ground floor. An important component of the project is an open plaza created for the community, which includes areas for Tai Chi, a farmer's market, and a stage for concerts and film screenings, honoring the historic theater that previously occupied the space. The French client wanted the garden to be lush and romantic, which we translated into a warm palette for hardscape and plants. Last, a recent collage for a competition in San Jose. Our concept included a chromatic gradient across the site that works to restore the riparian habitat of the Guadalupe River, with a mix of low water need plants, including natives and species that would attract pollinators, bird life, and support the local ecology. Rather than create a sculptural element or structure for the space, we decided to make the planting the focus of the project. Thank you, Ashley, Jen, and Karine, the AIA, and for all of you for joining me this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure to participate in the Powerful 8 with such a stellar group of men and women. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Judy. That was so refreshing. I hope you have a chance to look through the chat. There's really wonderful commentary, and I think we all feel refreshed by seeing your beautiful designs and inspired by your pivoting path along the way to what you're doing now. So thank you very much. And yeah, please check out the chat. Wonderful. So now I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker, Athena Anne Lim. She is a designer and a co-owner of Studio Barnhouse. Her talk is titled Teach Her How to Fish. Athena, please take it away.
Can you guys hear me? Hello, powerful women. How are we all doing today? My name is Athena, and I'm incredibly honored to have been invited to be a speaker at this event. Thank you, guys. It's taken some time to really celebrate where I've been and who I'm growing into, but today, yes, I am a powerful woman. I'm happy to be here to share my story and experiences as a young professional, finding ways to stay connected to our field of architecture. I grew up in the South Bay city of Carson, California as a first-generation American. I come from a strict household where I was the youngest of 3 by a 10-year difference. So given that family dynamic, I felt like there wasn't room for me to speak up for myself and have my own opinions. And for a majority of my life, it was very difficult to trust my own decisions and feel comfortable with taking up space. I played my cards safe, wasn't much of a risk taker, and calculated what I needed to do to fulfill expectations of me. In 2013, I was picked up by a nonprofit organization called Pathways to Independence that called itself a scholarship program, but extended far beyond that. Pathways serves women who have gone through incredibly traumatic experiences. This program provided us housing, it provided addiction programs and therapy, it funded our higher education, it gave us a community of women, and so much more. As a testimony of my own success, I know and I have seen firsthand the positive effects of what a true outreach program can do to help women achieve their goals and aspirations. The most important element in their program was helping me find my voice. Pathways supported me for 3 years of community college at LA Harbor College, all the way up until I transferred and graduated with my Bachelor of Architecture degree from Cal Poly Pomona. I'm actually a very recent graduate. I graduated in 2020, right smack in the middle of a heated political climate and a global health crisis, which we're still going through today. It was a very scary and uncertain time for all of us. For all my fellow graduating class of 2020, my heart goes out to you. I know it was a hard pill to swallow. We had to cope with having to minimize our huge accomplishment of finishing architecture school to make room for the even bigger, even heavier grief of the world. Paths were rearranging. Some of us had to become providers. Some of us lost loved ones. Some of us were obeying stay-at-home orders in chaotic environments. So at that time, I felt stripped of my power, of my voice, silenced at the weight of the world, and very, very, very small. How are we supposed to start our careers during a time where no one was hiring? People were being let go and pending offers fell off the radar. Pre-COVID, competition was already pretty rough. Throwing a pandemic on top of that was like devastating to the odds of getting a job. I spruced up my portfolio and applied to all the jobs I could, and my heart just could not take the rejection any longer. Was it me? Was I missing something that they were looking for in an employee? Did I not rate myself high enough on my Revit skills? You start asking yourself these questions, and you're doubting yourself and wondering if your experiences and experience level were enough. I had no experience in a big firm, but I shadowed my community college professor and architect, Michael Song, for 2 years on this Long Beach project. And I was a summer intern for Tanaka and Riley Architects as a 4th-year student. And throughout my time as an undergrad, I was sporadically taking jobs from artists like Yenny Min, interior designers and contractors, my aunties, my uncles, anybody who needed plans, I was there. Who needed to work in the city, renders, I was there. Throughout my undergrad education, I started thinking about my goals. And for the last couple of years of school, I think I was really set going to get my master's and then get my license, and then possibly, in my dreams, creating a practice that I built myself. But how was I going to do that without a job in the field? What can I do with what this degree has taught me? And I have so far learned that the answer is a lot. We've all heard the saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. And Cal Poly has taught me how to fish. And that was the advantage of school. It's given us the technical skills, it's given us critical thinking skills, it's given us a community to ask help from. And that's probably one of the more important elements of school. You're surrounding yourself with people who have been in the industry for years, who have taken their profession in different ways. They've gone to teach, they've gone to create their own firms, they've gone into art, they've gone to become corporate leaders. And then you have your peers who you've essentially grown up with for the past 4 to 5 years, and they've acted as a sounding board in school. And out of school, they make up a network of very talented, very driven people with a degree in your industry. And that's insane to really think about how much school has given me in terms of networking and preparation. Though I would like to also point out that I don't think there's enough preparation in the world for you to go for your dreams and not fail at any point of that journey. And I say that to relieve you, not to discourage you. You can do tons and tons and tons of preparation for one thing, and it won't guarantee that that one thing will go smoothly. So at some point, you just need to activate your preparation. And things will unfold in front of you. For me, I knew I had the proper education. I come from a great school. My portfolio was like at least decent. And I have work ethic like a mule. And I really strive to be better than I was yesterday at whatever I'm focusing on. So it was like really confusing and really frustrating to not be called back in for a job. But I think that really worked in my favor. I mean, it really pushed me to branch out on my own, and I'm thankful for that. In a lot of ways, not being employed by a firm has fully freed me to fully commit in creating my own business. It was something I felt I needed to do to keep myself connected to this profession. I had to make a choice. If I wanted to continue a life in architecture, I had to be okay with the idea and real possibility of failure, a risk I hardly ever took. Like I said, I'm not a risk taker, but I am a yes person. And if I had to bet on myself, I was going to bet, yes, I can do what I love and really excel at it from a business standpoint. What was I risking? I was risking a stable paycheck. I was risking not getting my AXP hours. I was risking not getting my license, possibly getting sued. I don't know. And to be honest, I didn't want to feel like I was getting left behind. I wanted to continue my pursuit in architecture, learning more about design, staying in the loop of what architecture can do to help me give back. And I wasn't sure if going out on my own would do that for me. But frankly, I didn't know if going into a corporate firm would do that for me either. So I kind of just threw up my hands and I was like, what have I got to lose? Like, not much. You know, I was lucky enough to not have student loans, which kind of I'm very thankful for, and thanks to Pathways. And I already knew a contractor that knew an investor, and they both needed someone to take over their plans and design. And time was of the essence, as it always seems to be nowadays. And I said yes on a gut feeling that this could be my chance. I asked one of my good friends, Chris Manzano, that I graduated with, to hop on board as my partner. At first, you know, they trusted us with one project, and then 2, and then 5. And before we knew it, we had 10 projects under our belts within like 6 months. Currently, I run a design practice called Studio Barnhouse alongside Chris, and we're doing amazing. I think we just hit our 45th project of the year, which is like insane to me because it's like only been a year and a half in, and the momentum has been unbelievable. And I'm very excited to see where we'll go and what we can build. I'm also part of the 2x8 committee this year, hosted by AIALA Architecture for Communities in Los Angeles. AIALA is a nonprofit organization outreach program that strives to get architecture into more underserved communities and in more K-12 schools. I was introduced into 2x8 by being nominated into the competition as a student, and I actually won 2x8's 2020 Dome Award with my senior project. And I can quickly run through my design and my concept. It was a mixed-use housing project that housed formerly incarcerated homeless individuals and families. The project is just a 10-minute walk from the outskirts of Skid Row, where a growing 10,000 unhoused people find themselves packed in tents. They're camped in sidewalks within a 50-block radius in downtown LA. During my initial site visit with some of my friends from school, we stumbled upon a man named Rico, who's on your screen now. He wore a bright blue sweater and a black beanie full of life and energy. We offered him a cigarette in exchange for his story, happy that anyone had taken the time to stop and really hear what he had to say. Rico explained how he ended up living on the streets of Skid Row. He managed to make us cry and laugh with him in the same conversation, and then posed for a couple photos by the end of it. Throughout the conversation, he was patting down his sweater and his pants, and he was like, where are my keys? And we assumed that he just didn't have a key at all, and maybe he was like mistaken. And my heart grew heavy, realizing that he probably didn't have a place to stay that night. We were hugging him goodbye and sending our best wishes when he finally reached into his jacket pocket and excitedly jangled 2 keys. Here are my keys. And they were keys to an SRO that he's been able to stay at for some nights. This is a moment that will stay with me forever. Rico has shown me how a built structure could give someone hope, even just for a night. Moved by my site visit to Skid Row and the raw conversations exchanged with those like Rico, the project evolved into one that prompted compassion, care, and a sense of urgency to provide shelter and safety. More importantly, it was critical for me to create a space for the most neglected communities to develop a stronger sense of self and provide opportunities to reassimilate back into society. Straight Tectonics, which is the name of my project, provides 5 low-income townhomes, which would house families whose head of household are or have been incarcerated, social service facilities available for townhouse and formerly incarcerated homeless, a tower of 40 SRO units that would house the formerly incarcerated homeless, and finally, a ceramic manufacturing facility below ground. By providing multiple opportunities of program overlap throughout all levels of the project, it hopes to eliminate isolation and discrimination, usually heightened by built structures for these neglected communities. This project is near and dear to my heart, and I think I tried to materialize what Pathways did for me in a physical structure that actively served people and fostered a sense of community and safety. I think having chosen this demographic and program for my culminating project as an undergrad is pretty telling of my general view in architecture. And I also think that this project has been a projection of my own life experiences and my aspirations to pay it forward. I hope that I can bring these sentiments into the projects that I do now at Studio Barnhouse. And in closing, this entire journey has taught me more about myself and how in control I can be of my career. It seems very simple at one angle and very complicated in another, and it can be both. The biggest lesson that I've learned and I'm constantly learning how to do is pivot. When shit hits the fan, which it often does, I'm able to find solutions and accept things that they don't usually go the way that we plan. And that doesn't always have to be a bad thing. I certainly didn't plan for this, and that's the beautiful thing about life and business. We seize opportunities as they come and maximize where and when we can. My formal education in architecture didn't specifically prepare me to run a business, but it did give me the tools to think critically, have opinions independent from others, and to be confident in my decisions. We learn so much with every misstep and every failure. I hope all the women in this room I hope they don't find fear, but find power in the imperfections. We're all where we need to be in this moment. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you guys for having me.
I am absolutely floored by your presentation, Athena, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's very important for us to hear from this new generation of architects entering the profession and really flipping it upside down and redefining what it is and what we do. And just listening to the past few speakers we've had thus far, it's this powerful that Ashley and I have talked about of vulnerability and really taking things into your own hands and redefining things, and with the theme of on your own terms. And if everyone coming out of school right now has your energy and your compassion and your drive, I think we're all in really good hands. So I thank you, Athena. And before we get into our discussion panels today, we have one more speaker this morning, Leslie Braxton, who is a principal at Trainian Architects in Georgia. And the title of her talk is Embracing Your Path, Networking and Aiming Higher. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. All right, let me get everybody up and running. Share. Good morning. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that, Athena. I think I almost kind of shed a tear as you were going through that. And we're actually about to start a housing project. And so now I feel like I need to pick up the phone and call and help you be a good facilitator for us. So I'm Leslie Braxton. I'm a principal at Trainian Architects, and I have been a nomad most of my life. I have, and everybody can see my screen, I assume. And because I've lived so many places as a child, I moved 7 times in 17 years, which is a lot, not an army brat. And it allowed me to meet a bunch of different people. And then somehow I landed in Alabama, of all places, for school. And I ended up going to Auburn University. And it was there that I was exposed to Rural Studio. I got to spend time out there when I was with Sambo Mockbee, and it was wonderful because we got to build things with unconventional materials like rammed earth, cardboard bales. And one of the most rewarding things was that you can see in this picture, this is actually the back of the Rural Studio book. That's me climbing scaffolding at the ripe old age of like 19. We worked with prison labor, and these people were, not only were we helping them rehabilitate, but they were teaching us how to build. And every morning I'd go get up, I drove the school's dually, and I went to the prison farm and I picked these people up by myself, probably bad move looking back. But I left Auburn University with degrees in architecture and interior architecture. And right then and there, Sambo had passed away. So I left with a bit of a hole in my heart. And for 17 years now, I've been in practice. I feel like I was always trying to get back to my rural studio roots. So now getting back to those roots, I'm with a firm called Trainian Architects right out of New Orleans. We've got offices in New Orleans, New York City, and I'm in Atlanta. More to come on that. Thank you, COVID. And what's really interesting about us is that we have really limited, of course, my screen's gonna freeze. We have really limited amounts of hierarchy in our practice. Hold on, I'm gonna get this going. I can do this without imagery. Let's see if this will work. When you're trying to do a great presentation. So anyway, we have really limited amounts of hierarchy, and we find ourselves doing pretty amazing and daring things. Can you guys hear me? This is awesome.
We can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. I'm just frozen on my screen. So this means that we really spend a lot of time giving design authorship over to people that wouldn't normally have it. And in 2019, we won Design Firm of the Year and have now since started a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to democratic design and seeking justice. So I'm insanely hopeful for the future. It's been this really wonderful time of my life. And before I started really planning for this talk, I went to my friend Julia Gamelina. Some of you guys might know her. She's Madam Architect. She's also a colleague of mine. And so I went to her and said, oh my gosh, Julia, what am I going to talk about? And what are your readers really asking for? So two big things came up, and it was movement in the industry. And we've all heard about the great resignation and this big old tidal wave of people quitting in search of better opportunities. And then there's lots of questions about networking and how to build them, how to use them. So I really thought it would be fruitful to talk for 20 minutes or so, and then open it up for conversation. But 6 months ago, I had my own great resignation. I was a principal at Perkins and Will, a place very near and dear to my heart, and I was leading their learning and innovation group. It was composed of 3 studios: higher education, science, technology, K-12, and it was close to 40 people. And when I started that position, I was 37. I was high on a principal title. I was pumped. I felt like I could change the world. And it was a great practice with incredible people doing amazing things. And I love culture. I love teams. I love practice at many scales. And I think culture is kind of my guilty pleasure, like I said. So I felt really lucky to have those people in my life, and I still do. They're all part of a big part of my network. But I started thinking, when I started that job, I thought I was going to be leading big design teams and working on projects, pursuing projects. I had kind of grown up in this doer, seller, thinker model, and I loved it. But after a few months there, I realized what they really needed was a great collaborator, someone that could bring various regional offices together. My gosh, there was Texas, Miami, North Carolina, Georgia, sometimes Chicago, working with West Coast. There was just so many people, and we needed to all work together better because we were actually kind of in competition with one another. So I thought to myself, okay, no problem. I got that. Let's do this. But then I kept being asked to do more and more. And I too am a yes person. And I had a hard time saying no. So they would ask, can you be the regional practice leader for higher education? Sure. Can you lead the S&T studio? Sure. I know a lot about that typology, why not? This is great. I have lots of experienced people working with, and then of course, can you bring all the offices together? And I kept saying yes. And so yeah, Perkins and Will just kept asking me to do more and more. And so each week I was on a plane, I was building teams, relationships, speaking at conferences. I was Diamond Medallion on Delta, which if you guys have ever done that, it really sucks. So I was pretty much killing myself. I literally never saw my kids ever. I was missing baseball teams, swim practice. And worst of all, I was very ineffective. I was stretched way too thin. I said yes to way too much. I lacked focus. I was consumed by this constant pressure to meet quota. And if anybody has ever kind of been subject to like, you must bring in this much money, it's devastating. And and when you're responsible for leading teams, and I had 40 people that I was responsible for, like I wanted to make sure that everybody could feed their families. And I took that very seriously. So one of the major lessons that I learned through all of this is that I took a job that I had in my head, what I thought the job was going to be is not what they needed me to do. I didn't ask enough questions. I should have asked for a written job description. I should have asked to speak with younger staff before taking the position. I should have asked about their immediate needs and their corporate structure. And I should have asked, what will I not be doing? So in a way, and there's probably lots of us that feel this way. COVID actually saved me. I went from being out over my skis to traveling the world and suddenly grounded at home. There was no airplanes, no restaurants, no nothing. I had 2 kids buzzing around my head, 7 and 10-year-old just like running laps in my house. And I couldn't escape any of that. And I felt like I was defeated. I was giving up. They needed somebody like me. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the company. I just did not want to do that job anymore. And I felt stuck in Park. So it was really for me, it was about changing gears where I am now. I wanted to stay in Atlanta, but I didn't want to work for an Atlanta firm, another Atlanta firm. So I actually decided to build my own boat instead of jumping into somebody else's. So I started pitching to firms that I admire, and I wrote business plans, I made phone calls, and eventually I landed on Trey Trainian. He and I had known each other for a while, and it was, we had a real bond. And a couple of years ago, we had thought about working together, and then I said no, because the timing was not quite right, but the circumstances had changed, and I had grown as a leader. The world had proven that we could be remote, and Trey and I had a connection that was built on trust. We loved to laugh, and I also believed in the Trainian ethos, and that our work comes with a responsibility to our clients and to our environments, and that each project should be rooted and bound and connected by its soils and watershed, and that we should evoke an atmosphere that enhances the way people change and work with openness and articulate bold ideas. And this idea of artistry and giving over authorship to people that know more than we do was this really special thing. And it also, when you give over authorship, you start to build networks and people that around you that start to trust you and want to work with you. So the next little bit of this, I'm going to talk really briefly about networking. And so when I was 29, I took job number 3. And mind you, I've had 7 in 17 years, some not very long, but this was job number 3. I had gotten registered and I had moved to Birmingham, Alabama, because my husband had gotten transferred. And I had interviewed all over the place. I took this job. They were going to pay me $10,000 than everybody else. And at that time, $10,000 was a shit ton of money. So I took that job. Meanwhile, the place I really wanted to work was probably a much better fit for me, better, better ethos, better fit for my skills. But instead, I chased money. Bad move. So it didn't take me long to realize that I did not like that job at all. I had made a bad decision, but women, it was 2009 and I was 18 weeks pregnant. And that was the middle of the damn recession. So there was nowhere I was going to go. I was just mad. I provided my family health insurance, and finding a job was just not going to happen. But good news, that problem was solved for me. They broke up with me. I was laid off. At 18 weeks pregnant because they closed the office. So I went from health insurance, pregnant, ready to go, to nothing. But I remember like sobbing, getting on the elevator. And I feel like it took me 5 years to walk to my car, but before I can even get in, before I can even get in my car, I sat down next to it and I started calling people. I opened up my network. And of course I called, every place that I had interviewed before, and they're like, yeah, we love you, but it's the recession. We have no work. So the next day I got on the phone and I think I called probably 50 firms. It didn't matter. Like I would have worked at a McDonald's at that point because I was so nervous. But luckily 3 weeks later, a really good firm said, yeah, let's talk. And they said, yes. And they said, well, we love your design portfolio, but we're not hiring you for that. We're hiring you because you're a good communicator and we need people to lead the future of this firm. And that was the first time in my career that I could ever see past the present day, render queen, Revit master, doodler extraordinaire. And when I started architecture school, I had this I just had this impression that I had to pursue the pursuit of design at the exclusion of everything else. There's nothing else. There's just architecture or interior architecture. And my one true passion, if I didn't follow it, I was going to fail. But like really after thinking about that conversation, I realized that passion is not a path, it's a feeling, and feelings can change. And you can be passionate about something one day, a paint color, a person, and not passionate about it the next. So it helped me see how much else there is in our profession and how truly much I really did know. It also helped me see that I need to stop using my passion for design as a yardstick for measurement, and that fire deep down inside of me was actually like joy and love and passion, and it doesn't have to be one thing. So, when you go to school for architecture, you get a degree in architecture, which is literally means the art of practicing and designing and constructing buildings. Nowhere in there is managing people, winning work, mentoring, or do we get a minor in networking? So how was I supposed to have this passion vertical for design, knowing that I had to do all of these other things? So, but the deeper down in my career I drove, I really learned that networking was going to be my key to success. But I promise you, I was not setting the world on fire at first. It was a nightmare. I was awkward. I was nervous. I didn't feel like I had a lot to add to the conversation unless we were talking about hippie jam bands and long distance cycling. And so, but I got better. And I started going to events with my boss, who was a female and pretty amazing. And she was really into crew commercial real estate women. And I watched her. She would go into, before we even left to go to an event, she would pull out the attendee list and she would start doing research. And so she knew who everybody was before we even walked in the room. And then she would go and find that person or the people that she wanted to talk to. And she never led with business. She always led with something personal like kids or life experience. It was always genuine, never forced. And she's the one that taught me how to network. And so I let that passion for networking kind of seep in, and that's kind of where I am today. And I realized that passion's not a title or a job. And when you're passionate, people want to hear more about it. They can feel what you do. They can see it in your face. They can see it in your eyes and your voice, and you're confident with your delivery. And Julia Gamelina, she and I talk about this pretty regularly. We get pitched every day. She gets pitched for different reasons than I do, but I get, LinkedIn messages, phone calls, reps, you name it. But every once in a while, I'm blown away by somebody. And so this really last quick message is, I was called by a paint rep from Warrior Ace, LA, Lower Alabama. And he saw me on LinkedIn liking some of his posts about a fireproofing material, strangely enough. Warrior, the nano shield is quite literally going to change the way that we insulate and fireproof buildings. Such a weird thing for me to talk about, but it's legit. Go check it out. But he was a former stockbroker with this crazy network. And after our phone call, or at the end of our phone call, I was like, hey, do you happen to know any projects out there on the horizon? I feel like we're kind of looking in the same space. And in this super Southern accent, he said, Leslie, I bet I talk to 200 architects, engineers, contractors a day, and not a single person has ever asked me that. And it has been 7 months since I've had that conversation. And I assure you, that man has called me every day and is working his ass off on my behalf. We have since together put together an amazing team to go after a $3 billion project competition. He has called presidents of universities. He has called researchers. He has called congressmen. He has facilitated these conversations that I could have never done on my own. But just yesterday, I got back from New York City and I had this awesome, just envision this awesome picture of all of us at Microsoft. That's what I was going to show you. Of all of us together, this whole team, we had never met each other in person. We'd only spoken like this virtually. And 27 people came together from all over the country because we had a vision, we had passion, and we saw the way that we could change the world for this project, and these people bought it. So just telling you to use your networks, whether they're small, they're big, your friends, your family, and I assure you we can do so much more together. I apologize for being the delinquent child and having all of the technology difficulties. I will be more than happy to email you my presentation for AIA credits. So wonderful being here with y'all today, and hopefully everything gets smoother from here on out.
Wow, thank you, Leslie. That was an incredible story, and I am so in awe of how you pivoted with the technical difficulties, and you really showed us that what matters is your voice and your message. And we would love to see your presentation because I saw a sneak peek and it looked incredible. So yeah, we'll find a way to get that to people. But thank you for telling your story. It all worked out. And I think it's a good reminder to all, 282 of us here, that this is a network. And I think the biggest benefit of this being a virtual conference is the fact that we can have people really literally from all over the country and world join us and share your stories. So thank you so much. And check out the chat also, Leslie. I love what everyone's commenting on here. So we're a little ahead of schedule. We had a bit of a break in your presentation, Leslie. And that'll allow us to have just a little bit more time as we move into focus discussions, which is great for all of us. But first, we'd like to present some videos by our presenting sponsors. So Corinne will share that. Thank you.
I remember in my interview the pride in Barbara Fleming's voice when she told me the firm was more than 50% women.
And it's not an intention, but it's just looking at the person and the talent.
Other firms see that as some kind of goal that they want to achieve, whereas with us, it's just natural. You know, why wouldn't it be that way?
I walked around and I saw women in leadership roles. I felt like I knew this was where I wanted to be.
The image of the confident female architect and the strong female partner, I see that every day, and those images are normalized to me.
I think we need to support each other and be a mentor to other people, to other women in the profession, and, you know, share your story.
It is one of the most fulfilling parts of my job to work with individuals on the job site to get the project done.
My daughter, who's almost 4, says my job is to build castles.
And then a personal big one for me is their support of motherhood, just ensuring that I have a strong work and home life balance.
We all stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us. And it is important for us to recognize the opportunities that we've been given by other women in architecture. It's their legacy for us to be able to bring that forward. Conferences like Powerful show us our community. We see how far we have come and how much farther we can go together.
Powerful is an opportunity to stretch for my sisters.
Powerful is having confidence not only in my profession, but in myself.
Powerful is believing in yourself and your ability to be powerful.
Let's welcome our last speaker of the day. I'm so excited to hear what Julia Oderda, AIA, has to say to us today. Julia is an associate principal, VCBO Architecture, and she will be speaking on working as yourself, building a more inclusive workplace. Julia, please.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've been kind of really blown away by all of the presenters and the discussions so far today. So hopefully this will be interesting for everybody. Let's see, get my shared. Does that work? You seeing the presentation? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I knew that I wanted to be an architect when I was about 15, but I always loved building things. I'm sure like many of you, whether it was Legos or blocks or Connects, whatever it was, if I could build with it, I was really into it. So that was kind of what drew me into architecture early on. A high school class of drawing floor plans and sections of a building really is what kicked me off, but it started really early. Oh, there we go. So I work for a firm called VCBO Architecture. I've worked here for about 15 years. These are some of the projects that I've had the opportunity to work on. It's been a really fantastic experience. I've had the ability to work on some really great projects, and it's only cemented my love of architecture as time has gone on. So I am an architect, but that's just one aspect of me. I'm a mom with 3 great kids. I like to ski and snowboard. I still love to build things. I am an excellent foosball player. I like to cook and hang out with my friends, and I am transgender. So before we get too far into this, I want to kind of lay out some terms just so everybody's kind of coming at this from a similar location. So transgender is the feeling of when your internal sense of gender doesn't match your external sex. Also, it's an adjective, not a noun. So I am a transgender woman, not a transgender. Cisgender is just the opposite. That's going to be probably most of you. That's where your internal sense of gender matches your external sex. And then dysphoria is the stress that is caused by the incongruity of your internal sense of gender and your external sex. So quick disclaimer, I am just one woman. I do not speak for the trans community. There is a lot of information that's available out there. I should not be your only point of information. So go and do some research, look some things up. There's a wealth out there. I also want to acknowledge that my position is one of relative extreme privilege. I am a trans woman. That does come with, some baggage, but I am also white. I am middle class. I am well educated. So that puts me ahead in a lot of ways. So many people have very different experiences. So I want to make sure to acknowledge that. So why does any of this matter to any of you? Why should you care about trans people? The first thing is, we're portrayed as this extreme minority, and there's not that many of us, like 0.6% of the population is the current numbers I've seen. That's 1.4 million Americans. So in reality, that's not really that small. That's more than the population of Wyoming or Vermont or Alaska, either of the Dakotas, Delaware, Montana, Rhode Island, Maine, or New Hampshire. So there's a good amount of us. But more importantly than that, we exist. We are your neighbors, we are your friends, we may be your children or your parents, and we deserve the ability and the dignity to survive and to prosper. And part of that is being able to work as who we are. So I think this statistic may be a little bit out of date, but I think it's interesting that fewer than 30% of people have reported knowing somebody who is transgender compared to 90% who claim to know someone who is gay. So hopefully this can expand that number a little bit more. When I was a kid, I didn't know that I was transgender. I didn't know what that word meant. It wasn't out there in the media or something that you could see. It wasn't even a term at that point. But the feelings were always there inside of me. I can remember being as young as 4 or 5 and going to bed and praying that God would turn me into a girl when I woke up. So that did not happen. And I learned over time that those feelings were something that I should keep inside of me, keep to myself. So I buried it deep inside me and kind of pushed it aside and tried not to think about it. I met the person who would turn out to be my best friend and my wife when I was 16 years old. We fell in love quickly, like you do when you're in high school, but for us, it's stuck. So we've been married for more than half of our lives. We started a family and we have 3 great kids. This is a very old picture of our family, but it's always been one of our favorites. At that same time, I went to college. I went to the University of Maryland, and I followed up with graduate school at the University of Utah, where I got my master's. And I started working at VCBO, and I started progressing very quickly in my career. And I quickly rose to leadership in my firm. And I was kind of one step away from becoming principal. So everything I was hoping for in my career was kind of happening. So this is my life. It was essentially idyllic from the outside. I had achieved all of the things that I was hoping for in my career to that point, my family, my life, all of that seemed to be going very well, except for the feelings that were inside of me never went away. And they were slowly starting to eat away at me to the point where it was consuming me. It was the only thing I could think about. It was starting to ruin my marriage, and it was affecting my work and my relationship with my kids, and that just wasn't tenable. So eventually in 2016, I came out to my wife and started my transition. Now, if coming out to my wife was the scariest thing that I've ever done, and it definitely was, coming out at my office was a very close second. And there are a lot of reasons why it was so scary. So I am from Utah. I live here. It's a beautiful state. There's great scenery. There's great things to do outside. And it's a really wonderful place to be if you like the outdoors. My family loves living here. But there are some elements that were very concerning to me when I was considering coming out. These are just a couple of statistics that exist in Utah. We're the 6th most conservative state. We're the 11th most religious. And we have ranked for the last 3 years 50th for women's equality. So those are not great. But it wasn't just Utah that was concerning. These are some nationwide statistics about transgender employment. So quick note, these are from the 2015 US Transgender Survey that was put out by the National Center for Transgender Equality. They're a little outdated. They were supposed to have a new survey that went out in 2020, but obviously COVID put that on hold. But these are the best numbers that exist out there. It was the most comprehensive study that's been done to date. So 1 in 3 trans people have been fired or passed over just because of their gender identity at this point. In 2015, we experienced a 15% unemployment rate compared to 5% for the general population. And fully a third lived below the poverty line compared to 14%. So those are kind of scary statistics. This is a map that shows states that have positive laws and policies that drive equality based on gender identity. So red is not good. So that's a little concerning. This was not the case when I was coming out. It wasn't quite there yet, but this shows the amount of laws, anti-transgender laws that have been put forth over the last 4 years. You can see there's been a dramatic uptick over the last couple of years, and it doesn't really show any signs of slowing down. In fact, just this week, Texas was called into its third special session to pass more laws against trans people. They have tried 3 different times so far to pass laws defining transition as child abuse and forcibly detransitioning kids and stopping participation in sports. And they just keep bringing the special session up. So it's not a great time at the moment. But there were some bright spots. Utah, as strange as it sounds, has ranked 2nd in the nation for supporting laws that protect the LGBTQ community. There have been some great organizations here that have worked with the dominant religion to come up with some compromises to get laws on the book. In fact, gender identity was added to the non-discrimination ordinances years ago as a protected class. So I had that in mind when I was thinking about transitioning, was that it theoretically should be okay. However, we are a right to work state, and there are many reasons why somebody could possibly fire you, right? So that was still kind of scary. So you don't have to, you don't have to memorize all this. There's not going to be a test, but you should know that there are no laws that explicitly protect transgender people when it comes to employment. What we have is a series of acts that have been interpreted over the years to apply to trans people. And the top one there, the Civil Rights Act, Title VII, was recently confirmed with the Bostock decision as being trans is inherently related to your sex, and it would inherently be a result of discrimination based on sex. So that decision has really set up a federal statute in a sense that will protect trans people, which is really good. And then there are other federal instances that will also protect trans people. And then some states have their own laws that are very explicit about adding gender identity to their non-discrimination laws. So that was the context that existed when I was coming out. Our office is relatively diverse for Utah, but it is Utah, so not as diverse as some other places. But when you look at our leadership was entirely white, overwhelmingly male, was about 75% male, and there were no out queer leadership and any queer people in leadership. In fact, at that time, there were no out queer people in our firm of almost 100 people. So that was kind of a scary situation. So one of the things that I did when I was preparing to come out to my firm was I created a document that would help kind of lead the way and provide an outline for them of all of the things that needed to happen. And part of this was a result of my own anxiety and my desires to control the narrative and to control the way that this process was going to unroll. And part of it was to just help them. I didn't want to put them in a position where they may have questions that they would have to seek answers out that I wasn't providing them. This document was over 50 pages and had appendices with support documents. So it was a little excessive for what I was doing, but it really helped me out to set the stage. So I did create the document, but I relied heavily on a lot of work that had been done by others. I am just an architect, so I did a lot of research. There's a lot of really good resources out there for people who may be in my position needing to transition, or for firms who are thinking about how they can provide a welcoming environment for somebody who may be transitioning or is queer, or a whole other variety of attributes. The Society for Human Resource Managers has a lot of really good articles on their website, and have even more that have been added since I came out. So that was a really good resource for me. I also looked at, there were some good articles from the Harvard Business Review and a really good toolkit from Brigham and Women's Hospital for tasks that may have to be undertaken. So I relied pretty heavily on those, and they're a really good resource for all of you. So I'm going to talk through kind of what I laid out and what my process was for my firm. And I recognize this is maybe not something that many of you are going to have to deal with directly, but it highlights something that can be done in your firms, anywhere that you work, to make preparations to make it easier so that it's more encouraging for somebody who may feel like they need to come out. So the first thing that I did was I created a series of what I call task matrices. It was basically just a spreadsheet that identified things that needed to be done. So we had to create a transition team. I wanted my leaders to build their knowledge of trans issues. So I provided them resources and guides to let them do some reading up, and then establishing timelines. So one thing that I was pretty clear on is that I wanted to control the timing of my announcement. I was sort of planning on this, and once they had expressed support for me, that is. But I wanted to be kind of in the driver's seat. And it's an important point that everyone's transition is going to be different. What was necessary for me may not be necessary for somebody else or someone that you may run into. So it's really important for the person who's kind of putting themselves out there to have some ownership and control of the process. So I wanted to set the date and then wanted their input on some of the other aspects. Then I had a list of tasks that needed to be done on the day of when I did my actual coming out. So I wanted to send an email announcement to everybody in my office, letting them know what was going on. And then originally I was planning on alerting all of the clients that I have worked with. So this is part of the negotiation. All of our principals felt like they wanted to be able to have a conversation in person with their clients to talk about, my transitioning. And I thought that that was fine, so I provided them some talking points that they could use in their discussions. And then identifying anybody else who needed to be notified, just to make it as easy as possible once I came back and was just being able to live out as myself. So part of that is the communication. So I created draft emails that I could use to send to my office, and we could send to clients as necessary, and consultants, contractors. I was in a conference a couple of years ago talking about being out and queer in architecture, and somebody mentioned that it's kind of a weird thing, the idea of coming out of the office, because it's not like you're going to send an email and announce your presence to everybody. But that's actually what I did. I sent, in addition to alerting all of my coworkers, I sent 400 individual emails to people that I'd worked with, letting them know who I am and what I expected of them. And then I created a list of tasks that needed to be addressed after I came out. So there's a lot of things that can go into this. I had to, update my signature line on my email, needed new business cards, a new nameplate, my bio on my website and all of our marketing materials need to be updated. This was kind of just an attempt to think of anything that could misgender me or misidentify me in the future that I wanted to avoid. And this is not a comprehensive list. It's a good starting point, and everybody's firms would have different needs for where they may have to update things. The last one, employee training, was kind of an important one. I wanted to have, and our office did, bring in somebody to talk to the staff, answer questions about trans people and LGBTQ people in general and working, let them ask any questions that they may have. And I didn't want that person to be me, because I just wanted to be able to kind of get back to work and get on with my life. And I didn't want to be a resource for an entire office. So that was a really important thing that our office did. Another thing that was really important to me was updating our employee handbook. So, we have a fairly robust policy for equal employment opportunity and harassment. We hit all of the federally required guidelines, but we didn't explicitly protect sexual orientation or gender identity. I mean, we were covered under the part that says, or covered by other state law or federal law. But I felt like it was important to be proactive in saying, this is who we are, and we don't want to discriminate against any of these people. In fact, that started a conversation that has sort of spread that a little bit farther, and we're a little bit more specific. And I think that's a really important thing that anybody can do at any time that costs basically nothing. It's a really easy change that anybody can do. And I think it's important to say who you are and what you believe and what you stand for at the very beginning. And your handbook is a good place to start. So thinking about how any of you can take this, there are things that you could do now to be prepared. And it extends beyond just trans people. It relates to other, categories of protected classes of people, and really just everybody's individual experiences. But as it relates to trans people, take a look at the Bostock decision and see, we are protected. We cannot be fired just for being who we are. But your state and municipalities may have other separate laws that could cover other people as well. So you need to be careful that you understand those. Look at your healthcare requirements. Make sure you're not providing policies that don't cover trans people. Look at your family medical leave policies, review your dress codes. All of these things are things that I think everybody should do just to make sure that we're not excluding anybody who may want to come work with you. And that statistic that talked about how many people were unemployed, I think really represents an untapped resource when you think about who you're looking to hire. So whatever we can do to be welcoming is really important. So one last thing, just a plug, I am just one architect. There's this great organization called Stalled that's been working on trying to increase accessibility for bathroom stalls and reimagine how this can work to serve all sorts of people, from trans people to people who may have a disability to people who may need assistance, and kind of rethinking the whole bathroom dynamic. They've been doing a lot of great work. In fact, they were important in pushing through changes to the International Plumbing Code that came out in the 2021 code that are hopefully being adopted nationwide that allow for all gender multi-user restrooms. So they're a really good resource. And that's it. I wanted to put my information up here just in case anybody wanted to reach out and had any questions. I'd be happy to answer those separately. But thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and this has been a really fantastic conference so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. I will say I've had the pleasure of working with Julia briefly on a project, and she's just as thorough on her projects as she was in her presentation. Great. Do we want to pull up the next slide? Julia, did you want to answer any questions now, or do you want people to just reach out to you with the information you provided?
If there's time, I have no problem answering questions. I didn't know that there would be time for questions. That's why I put my contact information. So whatever you guys want.
Okay. I think we have a minute or two if there's anyone who has a question, but if not, we can move to the next slide. So if there's anyone with a question, we could put it in the chat.
I think the main thing I'm seeing, Jen, and for Julia, is a inquiry about if you have comfort sharing some of the work that you did and that you shared with your firm. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm seeing a lot of questions about that specifically.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, I think to Jen. I have all of the documents that I created, kind of a PDF, which is again very kind of tailored to my experience as coming out, but then all of the resources that I've collected. I'd be very happy to share that with whomever, and I don't know the best process for that, but I'd be happy to get it to women in architecture, to you guys, and I don't know if you can disseminate it to everybody or how you want to do that.
And Jennifer and Julie, I think there is an interesting question from Stephanie Reich. Is that correct? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, about if you can talk about whether you feel you have advantages in your career identifying as a male person that are not available for you now that you're outwardly identifying as female.
I've been fairly lucky, I feel like, in my firm that I haven't had that experience. And I was talking to a friend. There's actually another woman here who's trans, and we were talking about career paths. And I said, I've just not really experienced any issues with being trans when it comes to clients or consultants. once I can establish the, my credibility as just an architect, then they tend to value that more than my gender. So that's just been my personal experience. I will kind of anecdotally state I have had all of the experiences that I think many people will have shared, where I'm on a job site with a male coworker who's working on my project, and I'm introducing the project and they turn all their questions to him. So I get to experience all of those things, which is lots of fun. But yeah, I don't know. I think I experienced maybe a little bit of male privilege in I experienced that in my early career. I think maybe some of it's gone away now, but I feel like my experience is enough to carry me through.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you so much for sharing and sharing your resources as well. And Jen, through the AIA, we can figure out how to make that available to this group. So thank you very much. All right.
I think we're right on time. Corinne, can you put up the next slide, please? So thanks everybody for being on this first day of our conference. I think we all came away with a lot of good insight and got to learn a lot during this morning. We do want to share that we also have the day 2 of the conference next Friday at the same time with different speakers, same discussion panels, but with different panelists. And yeah, I think it's also going to be a great morning, and we hope that you can all join us.
Yes, so thank you, Jen. Thank you to the AIALA, our incredible speakers, our panelists, and a special shout out to our vice chair, our past chairs, the entire planning committee. This takes a tremendous effort, as you can imagine, and thank you so much to our sponsors and really to the AIALA staff who have done so much behind the scenes work to make this all look so smooth and easy.